Have you ever trusted someone with your life only to realize too late that they were your worst enemy? Lagos City was a place of dreams and nightmares where the rich got richer and the desperate did whatever it took to survive. In this city, two best friends, Kemi and Grace, lived as sisters, inseparable, until jealousy drove one to commit an unthinkable crime. Grace wanted everything Kemi had: her life, her love, her happiness. So, one fateful evening, she invited Kemi to dinner, smiling as she served her best friend a drink laced with poison. Kemi took her last breath in the arms of betrayal. Days later, Grace married Kemi's grieving husband, Obi. But what she didn't know was that karma was watching. She thought she had won, but the son she cast aside would be the one to bring her down. Welcome to a story of betrayal, revenge, and justice. Lagos, a city of lights and shadows, where wealth and poverty walk the same streets, and where friendships can turn into rivalries without warning. Among the millions who called Lagos home, Kemi and Grace were different. They were inseparable, their friendship stretching back to their childhood days in Surulere. They had met in primary school, two little girls with big dreams. Kemi, the kind-hearted and ambitious one, always dreamed of running a business empire. Grace, on the other hand, was bold, adventurous, and daring. But deep inside, she envied Kemi's charm and luck. As they grew older, their paths seemed to align. Both got good jobs, both moved into the fast-paced life of Lagos, and both navigated their way through relationships and career struggles. But while Kemi's life flourished with genuine happiness, Grace always felt like she was one step behind. Then came Obi. Obi was every woman's dream: handsome, wealthy, and respectful. He worked as a top real estate developer in Lekki and had an aura of power around him. But most of all, he adored Kemi. "Baby, I want you to be my wife," Obi had whispered one evening as they walked along the beach. Kemi had laughed, blushing as she looked at the diamond ring sparkling in the moonlight. She had said yes, and her world felt complete. But there was one person who did not celebrate the engagement: Grace. That night, as Grace scrolled through her phone, seeing the congratulatory messages flooding Kemi's social media, a dark emotion settled in her heart. Why does she get everything? It wasn't just the ring. It was the life, the love, the happiness. Something snapped inside her. That night, Grace made a decision that would change everything. She smiled as she lifted her wine glass, whispering to herself, "If I can't have it, she won't have it either." The human heart is a deep, mysterious thing. One moment it holds love, the next it nurtures envy. Grace didn't just envy Kemi, she despised her. In the days following Kemi's engagement, Grace smiled on the outside, but inside, she was burning with resentment. "Congratulations, bestie," she had said, hugging Kemi tightly at the engagement dinner in a luxurious Victoria Island restaurant. But behind that hug, her mind was already calculating. She watched as Obi held Kemi's hand protectively, his eyes filled with love. That love should have been hers. Over the weeks, Grace started dropping subtle hints of doubt into Kemi's mind. "Are you sure Obi is faithful?" she would ask casually. "Men like him don't stay loyal for long. I heard something about him and another woman," but Kemi always laughed it off. "Grace, you worry too much. Obi loves me." That was when Grace knew. Kemi was too blind to see what was coming. Then one evening, as the city lights of Lagos blinked through her apartment window, Grace made a decision. If Kemi was gone, Obi would turn to her. She picked up her phone and dialed Kemi. "Bestie, let's have dinner tomorrow night at my place. Just us girls, like old times. Kemi didn't suspect a thing. Oh, Grace, that sounds perfect. Grace's lips curled into a smirk. Perfect indeed. The following evening, Kemi arrived at Grace's luxurious high-rise apartment in Lekki, Phase 1. The warm scent of jollof rice and grilled chicken filled the air, and soft Afro beats played in the background. You really went all out, Grace, Kemi laughed as she set her purse down. Grace smiled sweetly, her heart pounding with excitement. For my best friend. Anything. She poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to Kemi. To sisterhood, she toasted, lifting her glass. To sisterhood, Kemi echoed, sipping her drink. But Kemi didn't know. Her drink had been laced with a deadly poison. Minutes later, as the 2 women laughed over old memories, Kemi's laughter turned into a cough. Her vision blurred. The room started spinning. Grace! What's happening? Her voice was weak. Her body felt like it was shutting down. Grace sat back, watching in eerie silence. It's okay, bestie, she whispered, her face emotionless. Kemi collapsed, gasping for breath. She reached out, grabbing Grace's wrist in a final plea. You did this. Why? Grace pulled her hand away, watching as Kemi's life slipped away. And just like that, Kemi was gone. Grace exhaled. It was done. The next morning, news of Kemi's death spread like wildfire. She just collapsed and died, Grace cried to the paramedics who arrived at her apartment. Tears streamed down her face as she played the role of the devastated best friend. But the whispers in Lagos were growing. How can a healthy young woman just drop dead? Something is not right. Her best friend was the last person with her. Obi was devastated. He locked himself in his home, refusing to eat, refusing to talk to anyone. Grace was patient. She played the grieving friend, offering Obi comfort. And slowly, she became the only person he could turn to. 3 months later, she got what she wanted. The entire city of Lagos was shocked when the news broke. Obi had married Grace. The wedding was held at a luxurious venue in Banana Island, but the celebration felt wrong. The guests whispered, "Isn't this too soon?" Something is off. Grace was Kemi's best friend. How can she do this? But Obi was blind. Lost in grief and manipulated by Grace's comforting presence, he saw nothing wrong. As Grace walked down the aisle in an expensive lace gown, she felt victorious. She had everything now. Kemi's husband, Kemi's home, Kemi's life. But there was one thing she hadn't planned for. Kemi's 8-year-old son, Michael. The little boy watched from a distance, his small hands clenched into fists. He knew the truth, and he would never forgive her. Michael stood at the edge of the wedding reception, his small fists clenched. He was only 8 years old, but he was not blind. He knew something wasn't right. His mother, Kemi, had loved life. She was healthy, happy. How could she just die? And now her best friend, his own Auntie Grace, was wearing a wedding dress, smiling next to his father. Something inside Michael hardened that day. He didn't have proof, but deep down he knew Grace had something to do with his mother's death. Still, he was just a child. Who would listen to him? The days passed, and Michael tried to adjust to his new reality. But the moment Grace moved into their luxurious Ikoyi mansion, the mask came off. Michael became a problem that needed to be dealt with, and Grace had no mercy. The first time it happened, Michael thought it was a mistake. He sat at the dining table, waiting for dinner like he always did. But when the housemaid brought the food, Grace stopped her. "Michael is not eating tonight," she said casually, sipping her wine. Michael's stomach growled in protest. "Auntie Grace, why?" he asked, confused. She smiled. "Because I said so." That night, Michael went to bed hungry. And that was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Grace made life unbearable. "Obi, your son doesn't respect me," she would say, faking tears. "He is always causing trouble. He doesn't want to accept me as his mother." Obi sighed, rubbing his temples. "Michael, stop being difficult. Grace is your mother now. Respect her." Michael felt his heart break. His father had abandoned him. Obi had always been a loving father, but now he was blind. Blinded by grief, blinded by love, blinded by Grace's manipulation. One evening, Michael gathered the courage to tell his father the truth. "Daddy, she didn't give me food yesterday, and she slapped me." Obi sighed, looking at Grace. "Grace, is this true?" Grace gasped dramatically, placing a hand on her chest. "Obi, how can you ask me that? I love this boy like my own. I would never harm him." Obi looked at Michael with tired eyes. "Michael, enough. Stop making up stories." Michael felt his stomach twist. He was all alone. That night, he cried himself to sleep, but he made a promise to himself. "One day I will prove the truth." Grace knew Michael was strong. He wouldn't break easily, so she decided to push him out completely. One day, she called Obi in tears. "Obi, your son, he stole my gold bracelet." Michael's head snapped up. "What? I didn't take anything," he shouted, his eyes wide with shock. Grace turned to Obi, still crying. "Obi, please. I don't feel safe in this house. If he can steal from me, what else can he do?" Obi stared at Michael, disappointment in his eyes. "Michael, tell me the truth. Did you take it?" Tears welled in Michael's eyes. "No, Daddy, I swear." Obi shook his head. "I can't do this anymore. If you can't respect Grace, then you need to leave." Michael froze. "What? Pack your things. Leave my house." Grace smirked behind Obi's back. She had won. That night, Michael was thrown into the streets of Lagos, and Grace finally had everything she wanted, or so she thought. The cold air of Lagos hit Michael's face as he stepped out of the mansion. The world suddenly felt too big, too lonely. He walked aimlessly through the city, his stomach empty, his heart shattered. He had no home, no family, no one. That night, he curled up near an abandoned shop in Yaba, his tiny body shaking from hunger. "God, please, help me," he whispered. And then, fate stepped in. A black SUV pulled up beside him. The tinted window rolled down, revealing a middle-aged man and woman dressed in military uniforms. The man's deep voice echoed through the night. "What's your name, son?" Michael wiped his tears, his voice small. Michael." The woman exchanged a look with the man. "Come with us, Michael. We'll take care of you." Michael hesitated, then looked into their kind eyes. That night, everything changed. Michael had just been rescued by General and Mrs. Adeyemi, one of the most powerful and wealthy military couples in Nigeria. And his journey was just beginning. For the first time in days, Michael slept on a warm bed. He woke up in a grand house, a mansion in Banana Island, Lagos. The room was bigger than anything he had ever seen. The bed was soft and the air smelled fresh. Was this a dream? The door opened and the woman from last night walked in. Mrs. Adeyemi. "Good morning, Michael," she said with a warm smile. Michael sat up, confused. Why were they helping him? Mrs. Adeyemi sat beside him. "We know who you are, Michael. We know what happened to you." Michael's eyes widened. "We want to give you a new life," she continued. "You are special, Michael, and one day you will get justice for what was done to you and your mother." Michael swallowed hard. For the first time in a long time, he felt hope. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Michael was no longer a helpless child. The Adeyemis gave him everything: education, discipline, training. General Adeyemi A former military intelligence officer trained him in self-defense strategy and the power of the mind. To fight your enemies, you must first become stronger than them, the general told him one evening. Michael absorbed everything. He learned how to think, how to observe, how to be patient. But most importantly, he never forgot grace. Each night, he looked at himself in the mirror and whispered, "One day, I will expose the truth." And that day was coming. One evening, while going through some old files in the library, Michael found something shocking. A newspaper article from years ago. Young woman dies mysteriously in Lekki apartment. No foul play suspected. It was his mother, Kemi. But something caught his eye, a small detail in the report. The deceased was last seen having dinner with her best friend, Miss Grace. Michael's hands trembled, his heart pounded. She killed my mother. He had always suspected it, but now he knew it was time to get proof.